Probably the outstanding mission that the B-24s flew in World War II was the Ploesti raid against the oil refineries in Romania. And we're very, very honored to have with us tonight a number of men who were on that mission. And now we'll turn the program over to Mr. Dick Butler, one of those wonderful heroes of that era. Dick?
I'm Dick Butler, the 44th Bomb Group. A couple of months ago, Llewellyn asked me to put on this Ploesti Symposium tonight. I'm very familiar with Ploesti, but I thought I'd better check and see what a symposium...
Ask him to step up to the microphone. This gentleman right next to you, Bob, to your left.
In Romania, I fought in World War II Jeep, and I drove it until I quit. I just said, "Help with you guys, I'm out of here." So I made it here, and the first thing I said, number one...
Initial reaction was, well, here it goes, another Llewellyn operation. But then I found another meaning, which is a social gathering at which there is a free exchange of ideas. So we're going with that one tonight. We have assembled...
Conclusion is ask each one of our guests to make a very brief, and I stress the word brief, gentlemen, statement about your
Ploesti, Romania, on 1 August 1943. The operation was named Tidal Wave. Tidal Wave went into the annals of Air Force history as one of the bloodiest and most heroic missions of all time. According to official records, more decorations for bravery were awarded than for any other mission in the annals of aerial combat. There were 5 medals of honor, 3 posthumously. The total decorations for this single mission is in the neighborhood of 2,500. Of 178 airplanes launched, 54 were lost, another 4 were scrapped. 301 men were killed, and 130 wounded, and 124 became POWs. The attacking force consisted of 5 B-24 groups flying out of North Africa. The 44th and 93rd were sent down there from England, and the 389th, which was en route to England, was diverted to North Africa. The other 2 groups, the 98th and the 376th, were based in North Africa. Here with us tonight are mission veterans from our 3 2nd Air Division groups. From the 44th, we have Bill Cameron. Bill, would you please stand up? Bill was the pilot of Buzz and Bear. Charlie Hughes was the pilot of Flossie Flirt, and I was the co-pilot of Earthquake Magoon. From the 93rd, we have Lou Brown. Lou was the pilot of Queenie. From the 389th, we have John Brooks, who flew as command pilot and deputy group leader. We also have Norbert Gebhardt, who was co-pilot on Sack Time Sally. Peter Rice and Robert Wolfter, who were radio operator and engineer respectively, but they were on the same crew. And we have Raymond Nathy, who was a navigator on a plane that he said the name wasn't fit to be printed on it. We also have with us Roy Newton. Roy was a gunner on Hadley's Harem of the 98th Bomb Group. We asked him to come tonight because of his extremely interesting recent experiences concerning the aircraft on which he was a crew member. Briefly, his airplane, Hadley's Harem, was badly shot up, tried to make it into Turkey, ditched about 750 feet off the coast of Turkey. 7 of the crew members survived. The pilot and co-pilot did not. Within the past couple of years, Roy endeavored to look for the wreckage. He did find it and succeeded in recovering the forward section with the remains of the 2 pilots. He was assisted in that operation by our moderator tonight, who I will introduce shortly. And Roy also helped to sponsor our moderator being here with us. And it's real exciting to have with us Cornel Iliexu. He was a child in Ploesti at the time of the 1 August 1943 mission and has vivid memories of that day. His father was the transportation manager of the Concordia Vega refinery, which was one of the assigned targets of the 93rd. Cornel will share some of his recollections with us, and that authentic 1941 Jeep parked out front belongs to him. Our moderator for this event is Peter Frizzell, who has come all the way from Florida to do this for us and give us the benefit of his years of extensive research on this mission. As a tidal wave historian, he has interviewed scores of veterans of the mission, including most of the leaders. He was also the key person in the recovery of the wreckage of Hadley's harem, and in the last portion of this session tonight will share his experiences on that effort with us. The filming of tonight's affair is being done by Joe Denuegas and will be part of a Ploesti documentary. Okay, Pete, it's all yours. Okay.
Well, good evening to you all, and it's very good to see some old friends here at Second Air. It's been a couple of years since I've been able to attend one of your reunions, but it's a great honor for me tonight to be part of this symposium, because up here on this panel tonight are many of my heroes as I was a child. And I want to answer a question here tonight that I've been asked many times over the years, and I'm sure many of you out there have about me tonight, is that how did a man at this age get so interested in the Ploesti mission and B-24s in general? And when I was about 9 years old, I got a hold of a copy of this book. It was written by one of your own here at the Second Air, a man by the name of Cal Stewart, a very fine writer who is also here tonight. And they say that you can take journeys in books, and I'm living proof of that. This one has taken me around the world. What I'd like to do here briefly, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about Ploesti, and I know that it's been talked about much over the years, is point out some of the unique things that make Ploesti a little bit different from most other air missions in World War II. I think the most noticeable difference is that Ploesti was a low altitude attack. Most airplanes went into the target that day under 250 feet. For an airplane as large as a B-24, this meant that the people on the ground could hit them with pitchforks and just about anything else they could hurl into the air. And they were doing just about everything but that. And the planning of the mission is something that's also unique, because there was a great deal of time and effort put into model making, the acquisition of photographs of the target area, the refineries. Fortunately, most of these refineries were built by British companies, American companies, and our engineers. So there was an enormous amount of blueprints available, photographs that were all collected and gathered up by these British engineers, and they built models in such exact detail that I had a navigator from the 44th Bomb Group once tell me in an interview that when they were standing around this model table, and they had a British engineer come in from one of the refineries, and he said, "You see this house right here? I lived in this house. You see this brick wall right here? I built that wall." So the model makers had gone to amazing efforts to get the detail right, because these crews were going to be making an oblique attack at such a low altitude. They had to be able to recognize their specific targets coming in at 200 plus miles an hour. And I think they succeeded magnificently, because when we'll get to this a little bit in the discussion tonight, I've had many crews tell me as they sat there going into the target with their target folders in their laps, as they came up on the target, there it was just as they had seen it in the models, through the movies that had been made about the target area. And to me, this is a remarkable thing that they were able to do this under the conditions that they were working. What I'd like to do tonight with our panel, rather than ask a blanket question and have each and every one go down the line and answer the same question, I've had the very, over the years, I've interviewed most of these gentlemen at some time or another. So I can ask more pointed questions, and I think we can move this thing along at a pretty good clip. I'd like to start with Dick Butler here on the end. And Dick's group tacked a target that was south and east of Ploesti, and it was Blue Target. Now, Blue Target was producing mostly aviation gas, and it was one of the more important targets in the Ploesti area because of that fact. It was one of the only targets, other than the 389's target, that had not been hit prior to their arrival, so they were able to get in there cleanly. And if you could, Dick, maybe you could say a few words about the 506 approach to the target and what you encountered on your way in.
As we came over the mountains and then started our letdown across the plains to go into the Credit Tool Minier refinery, which Pete mentioned, that was the only one of the plants that was an aviation gas producer. Right, Pete?
That's correct.
And after we got down to low level and were proceeding toward the target, why, we saw haystacks open up and firing from haystacks. We saw a train paralleling our course, and they dropped the sides of the box cars and were firing at us from those flat cars. We saw what we thought was a hospital, because it had a big red cross painted on top of it. And they were firing at us from that. So we were being fired at from a lot of different places. We were leading an element of 3 airplanes. And the main thing I recall is we got real close to the target. We had a bombardier by the name of Henry Zwicker, who was killed in a later mission. But Henry was so intent on that boiler house that was our aiming point that he was just screaming over the interphone, left, 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 left. And we did get that left, and we did get the bombs where they were supposed to be. I'm very proud of the fact that our mission was flown as brief. The target was completely destroyed, never rebuilt, and did affect training and of the Luftwaffe after that. And I've read that because of the shortage of avgas that took place from that, the Luftwaffe was not as able to get up as early for intercept missions as they had been previously. After the target, we took a shot that knocked out our number 3 engine, and then we hit a barrage balloon cable, and things got a little tense around there because number 3 and 4 both looked like they were out. I feathered number 3, and Walt Bunker, the pilot, reached up and feathered 4. And so we had 2 engines out on one side momentarily till we got number 4 unfeathered again, and continued on from there. Okay, Pete? Yeah.
Our next speaker is Colonel Bill Cameron, and he was a pilot with the 67th Squadron. And Bill, maybe you could tell us a little bit about coming into the target area and your impressions of seeing White 5 on fire and burning. And
well, I hate to follow Dick, because his story is pretty dramatic, but I want to make mine, you might have to lie about it. But at any rate, they went off to the right, from my standpoint. We came in with a 98 bomb group on our left, followed them down and followed that railroad track to our targets. But way before we got there, we could look ahead. It was very obvious there were a lot of fires out there. There was a lot of smoke and a lot of flame, you know, probably when we were 20 miles away, or maybe longer, I don't know. So we knew when we made that big sweeping turn in towards the target that there was something had gone wrong. Well, of course, what had gone wrong is that 93rd had bombed our target. So we went sweeping in there, and another thing I have never understood, maybe some of the guys in the 98th, if there are any here tonight, no, they wouldn't be, I guess, no. At any rate, as we went in side by side with them, I found 98 airplanes. You could tell them easily they were pink. We were green, and they were coming across us. I had one underneath me. I'm 200 feet, 225 feet. One underneath me, one just over my head. I could see the rivets. So you know you couldn't do anything. You couldn't move. And I never did understand why those airplanes swept across sort of sideways. Well, accepting that, up ahead, and you've seen the photographs. There's the wonderful two columns of smoke and a daylight in between. I think everybody must have headed for that opening. But whatever the cause, it was very congested as we went into that target area. Frankly, being a pilot, you're up in front of the airplane on the left-hand side and you're just trying to do your thing and stay in formation and stay your altitude above the ground. You don't look around very much. But far as I could tell, our guys never saw the target, and we was just smoke and flame. Now we were right behind General Johnson, so if he was on track, we were on track. But we burst out of there, and the guys are screaming, "We can't see the target." It was just smoke and flame. So I said, "Let them go," and they did. So God knows, if we hope we did some good. But it certainly was probably not on the target as we were intended. And I think, does that cover it?
Yeah.
Well, let me just add this. When we made a turnout, as we were all 5 groups were originally planned to do, make a lovely turnout, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups, and all go out together, and you know, everything was lovely. Well, of course, we were scattered all over heck. And all we saw were ME-109s and 110s and other types of German aircraft. But it's amazing, I think, as many of us made it through there as did. Thank you very much.
Next guest would be Colonel Charlie Hughes, and he flew with the 66th Squadron. And Charlie, perhaps you could tell us a bit about your experiences going into the target and any unique occurrences that happened on your ship.
My name is Charlie, and it turned out I was tail end Charlie on this particular mission in the line of aircraft that was following our leader who just preceded me. I guess he was slightly behind Colonel Johnson, but it turned out after the mission that there was another man behind me, and his name was Bob Felber, who was sort of a substitute, sent on the mission as a replacement, but came in behind everyone else. I did not know at the time that he was following us. As far as coming into the target, I was pretty busy at getting down to 100 feet or less, flying on my leader, a guy named Gentry. So I didn't see too much going on around us, but I could see out of the corner of my eye this column of smoke and flames that was up ahead that Bill mentioned. And the closer we got, the more I became worried about it, even though I couldn't look directly at it because I was watching Gentry very closely, trying to keep my position in the formation. When we did come to the column of smoke and flames, I being on the left, sort of veered a little left to try and miss it. Gentry veered a little bit to the right to miss it, and in the meantime, I ended up in this group of pink aircraft that surprised me, that Bill spoke of, 98th Bomb Group. Gentry and George Washington Winger on the right-hand side of Gentry did not come home. I did not come home either. I went to Turkey, and you did not mention internees. I think he mentioned POWs and losses and all that, but we had 70 people, 7 aircraft in Turkey, ended up in Turkey. We got out, my crew and myself, my officers and the crew got out of Turkey in about 6 weeks and went back to England. The most vivid portion of the mission that I can remember was after the target, of all things. I did not know we'd been hit by anti-aircraft and whatnot going in, and a couple of wounded men in the back and 40 millimeter through the wings. But my most vivid impression was this picture of tracer bullets coming immediately under our aircraft, obviously from a fighter behind us. And I just instinctively pulled the aircraft up to escape those bullets that I knew were coming underneath the aircraft, because we were on the deck at the time. Also skidded the aircraft to the right, which I thought might deflect his aim, and sure enough it must have, because a short while later he was gone and we were on our way to Turkey. As far as landing in Turkey, we did not have to ditch like your aircraft did, but we did land at the nearest airfield, and as I say, spent 6 weeks there and then went on back to England thereafter. That's enough for the tail end Charlie story, I think.
Next we'll have Lou Brown, who was a pilot with the 93rd Bomb Group, and Lou and I met in Hilton Head in '94, and Lou has a lot of interesting stories to tell, but I'm going to ask him to touch on a couple of different points tonight. One is, as these 5 groups crossed the mountains over Yugoslavia to drop down into the Danubian plain, they encountered a lot of clouds, and this created a separation between the leading 2 groups and the trailing 3. And also, as they neared the target area, this separation led to a 20-minute delay between these leading 2 and trailing 3 groups. And Lou, if you could say a few words about that trip across the mountains there, and then if you could also talk about your trip into the target.
Well, recalling 54 years ago is a difficult task, especially at my age. So bear with it. Your recollection of these things sometimes get exaggerated, but we try to hold them to the truth. But I remember coming across the mountains, and we were all in formation. I think our group had, I forget, we had 24 that went to our target and 12 more that went to another target. I forget exactly where. And we come over the mountains, and there we're on top of an overcast. And the lead group and the 93rd, the lead group and the 93rd were second group, we went down through the clouds, I don't remember how thick, 1,000 feet maybe somebody could help me, and came down and went down. I was leading the high right, and the wingman can see, of course, you know, the wingman can see your leaders, but your squadron leaders cannot see his wingman. So we went through those clouds, the first group in our group, and I said a real short prayer, and I meant every word of it. Lord, be with us. And we broke out underneath in perfect formation. That's unreal. And now what was that second question?
If you could talk a little bit about your run into the target area and how the 93rd ended up approaching the target from the direction that you did.
Well, I don't remember too much about that, but I do remember going into the target area. We went in 6 abreast for four 6 abreast, and when I was leading tail end Charlie, that 6. And the prop wash was horrible in front of us. And the day's terminology of that is vortex. They're from these big jets now, but it's prop wash to us. And at one time going into the target area, of course the flak was just horrible. It's just like it was up at altitude, but it wasn't quite as lengthy. My left wing got down. And you pilots know when you get a wing down, you take right aileron, right rudder, and it takes a lot of it, and it'll flip you over. My co-pilot, Homer Moran, and I had all we could do. We were literally flying on one wing. And to get that wing up, I had to pull right 2 engines off and left 2 engines forward. and that would flip an airplane normal. That's how, but I don't know whether that was, and then we going into the target we lost Ampolis on our right. And that's about it. And after we got over the target, we dropped down really to cornstalk high to get out of any other ground fire and came on home. Thank you.
Next we have Pete Rice, who was a radio operator with the 389th. And Pete, you told me a story in the bar the other night, and we're going to let you have at it here. Tell us about some of your more interesting experiences on your crew that day, because you were taking pictures with a K-20 at some point during this trip.
Peter, it's a pleasure. I met Peter 4 or 5, I'm forgetting anymore, 6 years ago at Hilton Head, and he had taped me at that time of my experiences with on our mission at Ploesti. So I'm amazed that these fellows before me, they all got up here without any notes, and they're good, they're all great. I think they deserve a big hand, because they're great the way they spoke without any notes at all. But I had written a little story here, Peter, if you don't mind me reading, okay?
Please do.
Our group of the 389th, we left England for our assignment in Africa. I'm talking about 1943, early 1943. And after a fuel stop at French Morocco, we lumbered into our desert base at Benghazi, which was then Italian Libya. And of course, that time my recollection of this area was just a surrounding desert. That's all it was. It was just a big flat piece of land. And our home barracks were tents that we had to anchor into the ground, because in the evening time the winds were that great across that area, and we had to anchor it down pretty good. But the world, we had a fight down there in that desert, Benghazi desert, was the insects, the flies and the bees and all sorts of vermin. We had to fight them actually with our meals. We went over to get our mess kit of food, and this is an honest to God truth. We had to brush the flies off our mess kit to get them out for the food, and that's the truth, because we had to fight them all the time in that area, and the Arabs that lived there, they were waiting for what we were going to discard from our food and throw into our garbage bins, which they gobbled up. Those people were immune to the flies. They gobbled up the flies and the insects along with it. But one incident that we had, that you couldn't put any, if you got any of the goodies down, every now and again you got some chocolates or whatever that come from the States, and we would conserve it. We had learned early down in the desert that you couldn't conserve any chocolates or cookies or whatever. It took only 1 week to find out that you had to consume it and eat it. But we had one of the members of our crew. He was a bald turret man, Ed Griffin. He died down in Florida a few years ago, and he was a good guy, but he had written me. But he was a conservative type of a fellow, and he thought he was going to save his chocolate with cookies, whatever we had, and he packaged it up, one package, and he bagged it up in another, and he put it into another, and he put it into his bag, his foot locker. It only took a day, because we had all eaten ours. The rest of the crew, we had eaten our food. We knew enough to get rid of it. But he wanted to save his, because he was going to gloat that he had his left. when he went in to get his package out, it was like a globby food of the size of a baseball that was amassing food of ants. It's just globby. They got in, the ants got into all of that, through all of the packaging he did. That's how dense they were down in Africa. But
Pete, I think they want to hear about battling the Germans and not the ants.
Is my time up? Is my time up?
Have you got interesting stories from the Battle of Ploesti versus the Battle of the Pup Tent?
Battle of Ploesti. Well, I'll tell you, see, my particular crew, and I have one of them here is with me tonight. He's going to speak a little later, and we have six of us that are left, and four. The three of them that we know have died. One of them we can't find out where he is or what happened to him. He lived out on the West Coast here, out in Washington, but we could never find out what happened to him. But our flight on Ploesti, we didn't really have that much problem. We were very fortunate. The angels surrounded our ship, and I seen ships going down all around us. They were crashing here and there, whatever. One of the lightning incidents I do recall is when we left the target area, we were flying over some of the farm area, and there was he must have been a young man, but he was riding a bicycle on the road, and he looked up in amazement to see all these big bombers flying over him, and all of a sudden one of the gunners, it wasn't our ship, one of the gunners fired a burst of .50 caliber down on the road, and you never seen anybody move as quick as that fella did when he took off on that bicycle. But that was one of the incidents that I recall coming back from Ploesti. But we were a very fortunate crew. We got back to our home base, and we were very, very glad that we were there. We were happy. It was a good trip for us. I don't think there were 5 or 6 scratches on our ship. I don't recall any damage to the plane at all. But we thank the good Lord that we made it. And I thank you all for listening to me.
Thanks, Pete. Next up is Norbert Gebhardt, who was a co-pilot with the 389th. And the 389's target was about 20 miles north of Ploesti. It was well removed from the rest of the other targets. And the 389th had the unique mission of flying up into the mountains and down a valley to strike their target, and they would be heading down towards Ploesti. And the 389th missed their first turn, went down the wrong valley. They recognized their mistake, went back up the valley and turned down and finally hit their target area. But if you could speak to us a little bit about your trip into the target area and some of the interesting things that took place around Campina that day.
Well, the 389th was, I guess, the most fortunate of the groups that went on the mission because we were separated from Ploesti, the city of Ploesti. As Pete said, we were about 15, 20 miles northwest of Ploesti, and we turned off back down the road a ways. And our trip into the target was rather uneventful. We got down low and went over the target the way we were supposed to. I was flying left wing on the lead ship, so I didn't see what was going on behind me. But I did see the bombs from our lead ship hit the target, and they just bounced and went through the walls of the power plant. And as was said, we were very fortunate. I think we had 2 small holes in the left wing, and we didn't have any trouble going home. We didn't have any barrage balloons over our particular target, and the fighters were very scarce. So we were very fortunate, and when they lost 6 airplanes, and 2 of them made it to Turkey. So we were very fortunate.
Okay, next up we have Raymond Nafthy, who was a navigator on this undisclosed ship. Ray, if you could step up to the podium and tell us a little bit about your day and some of the unique things that happened to you and your crew.
Well, among the things that I remember is that it seemed like about 2 weeks before the mission, we started doing some practice for low-level bombing. And we didn't know at the time what kind of a mission we were going to be in for. And they set up 55-gallon drums, almost like a guy setting pins in a bowling alley, and we went bowling in a B-24, dropping these blue, I think they were 100-pound practice bombs, which were filled mostly with sand and had a little puff of smoke or something to let you know that the thing had hit. And we'd knock these cans over with these 100-pound bombs. And of course, come the day of the mission, they woke us up before daybreak with electric lights. They had a generator and stuff. And, you know, we got to the briefing after got us a breakfast. And during the briefing, I guess it just started to turn daylight. Anyway, we saw on the map that they had strung up these miles and miles of yarn that they had strung up on this map. This is where we were going to go, way to hell and gone up into Romania. And it was quite a shock for some of us. But we were game, and if that's what they sent us for, that's what we're going to do. Well, I can remember we had a general, I guess he was a Major General Louis Brereton, who'd been out in the Far East. And I remember him giving us a send-off speech saying that, and he says, if we can destroy this target, it'll be worth it, even if we lose every one of you. Good luck. And, and he didn't go. I found out later that I found out later that they wouldn't let him go for I don't know what reasons, but anyway, being a morale booster was not his strong case, I'll tell you. Well, anyway, on the way into the target, before we start off the island of Corfu. One of the airplanes from another group apparently spun in, and I didn't hear if they ever had any survivors or what. But anyway, we kept on going, and we flew off of Emery Ward, who was the ship we were flying off his left wing, and John Brooks was the command pilot on Ward's plane. So we stuck right to him, flying off the left wing, and I believe it was Towson was flying off the right wing, and I noticed. We took this turn off, and I thought it was a little bit early because my time for the IP hadn't come up yet, because I was trying to navigate as closely as I could. And what it turned out looked to me like somebody was just flying a big double drift. Anyway, we got back up to where we were supposed to be, and then started on down toward the target. And it was just like sliding down a mountain if you were skiing or something, only we're doing it in an airplane. And we were indicating, something like 220, maybe 230. And I got on the nose gun, which was down on a B-24D. They had the single nose gun almost on the floor. And you had to get on your belly to do that. And for bomb sight, instead of the regular highly touted Norden bomb sight, for this mission, they modified just plain old gun sight. And the bombardier was more or less in the standing position, aiming at I don't know, he would need a bombardier for this kind of a thing. The pilot would have been good enough to just eyeball this thing, because we were just aiming for the front doors of this refinery, and it seemed to me like we were only maybe 50 feet off the ground. And came time to, well, anyway, Joe Mattingly was our bombardier, and I fired a couple of bursts, and he waved me off of that gun because it was bothering his concentration anyway. So I didn't want to just go for the ride. So anyway, he dropped his bombs, and we got out of there. And I remember later where Sisson says to Ward, he says, why didn't you tell me about that smokestack coming up? And Ward says later, he says, hey, Dale, I knew you'd see it. So anyway, we got up over and back down on the deck, and we must have been awfully close to the ground riding back towards home, because I think we crossed the Danube River at maybe about 15 feet altitude. And we had encountered some Messerschmitt fighters, 109, and also a Messerschmitt 110. It's a two-engine plane, what the Germans call a destroyer, Zerstörer. Later, one of our pilots commented that the pilot of that Messerschmitt 110 must have been an operations officer slow timing an engine, because he was no opposition at all. Anyway, I felt very comfortable once we got back out of the Mediterranean and we headed for home. And we got back just before it turned dark, and we were able to land. And we had maybe about a half an hour's worth of gas left in our tanks after we were airborne for some 13 hours and 30 minutes. That's about the extent of the highlights. One I remember was a woman, after we'd passed a target, I saw a Romanian farm woman and her child. She knelt down in the field and crossed herself as we were sailing on by. I can remember that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Our next speaker will be Bob Wolfter, who is the engineer on Sack Time Sailor. We have 3 members of that crew on the panel tonight. And Bob, if you could step up to the mic, take your pick here. We've got 2.
My view of this is a little different than many, because as flight engineer I was responsible to see that things that I could do during the flight was maintained. However, we got started off very badly in the morning. They filled the ships with gasoline the night before, and then the next morning they topped it off. Someone failed to safety wire one of the gas caps, and we took off. Gasoline was streaming out of the engine, out of the wing. So we couldn't shoot a flare, so we got the red light and finally let us come back in. And we didn't miss the mission. They safetied the gas cap and we got off again. My job normally in combat was left waist gunner, but since they removed the ball turret from this for this mission, and also they allowed the front bomb bay to be no bombs, we filled those with gasoline tanks. And one of my chief worries after we took off was, will I transfer this fuel properly? Because if I didn't, we weren't coming back. I got up on top. This transfer is done by a pump over top the wing inside the fuselage. So I got up there, and this was after we left the target, and I could hear all this noise and shooting going on, and here I'm lying right on top of the gasoline tank. So I did get it done successfully. We then followed down a very low altitude, and I do remember several Romanian folks would wave at us as we went by. And I was very proud of the group that I flew with.
Thanks, Bob. They've slipped an unidentified guest here on me, and I'm going to ask him to step up to the microphone. This gentleman right next to you, Bob, to your left.
I'm George Hammond. I was the group bombardier, and I was only able to go on this mission because somebody else got sick, and I thought it was you know, a real privilege, and a little later on I discovered that it wasn't so much of a privilege as I thought it was. But one of the things that I can remember is that after the target, of course, we dropped right down practically on the deck, and I can still see a kid about, maybe 8 or 9 years old, throwing a stick at the airplane, and he almost hit it.
Thank you, George. Next up, we have General John Brooks, who I happen to have the pleasure of spending the day with him and his lovely wife up in Newaygo, Michigan this past summer. And I know there was a couple of things that you wanted to touch on, General, and why don't you step to the microphone and...
Good evening. Thank you, Pete. The heroes these are heroes, all right, up here. They're heroes to face you all out there. Because you all had a good war, you fought a good war, and you did a super job. It just happens that we were on that one mission, but all the B-24 troops deserve a real strong vote of appreciation and thanks from all of us, because they fought a good war. You may wonder why I'm wearing a jacket here tonight. When coming down in the elevator, my wife said my shirt doesn't fit anymore, so I had to put this jacket on to prove she was wrong. So, but besides that, I'm rather proud of the jacket too, because it covered 2 or 3 careers over there, and I got a Mustang on the back of it, and that shows I'm not just a bomber pilot, but that I went out ahead of the bombers and fighters and saw the bomber formations and saw what they were doing and knew the kind of flak and enemy fighters they had to go through. So I saw the war firsthand. But I also helped the commanders and my boys. They were all bomber commanders that knew the problem, volunteered for a second tour, and went out ahead of the bombers 40 minutes or so to help find our way to the target. But more important, when we couldn't hit the target because of smoke screens or weather or something like that, we were able to send the bombers to a tertiary or a secondary target, and they didn't have to fly over the flak of the primary target. I may be talking to some people that we really helped out on those occasions that didn't have to go through all that flak to get to the target. Well, this is a long way from Ploesti, but there's one more thing the B-24s did. Do I have time, Pete? One more
Briefly,
thing.
John.
There's one more. Well, I won't catch up with Pete yet. I'm not that far yet. The B-24s were asked to fly a formation like the B-17s flew. The B-17s got all the fame in the world, and they all talk about the B-17 being better than the B-24. But it was, in a way, it could fly higher and was more stable. But when we learned to fly the B-24 toward the end of the war, we switched off to 12-ship formations. We flew them at a lower altitude, that's more suitable to the B-24. And the record of the B-24s toward the end of the war, the last 8 or 9 months of the war, was superior to that of the B-17s. We had lower loss rates toward the end of the war, better bombing patterns, etc. So we can all be proud of the fact that we flew that clunker and we got home okay on it. On Ploesti, I was in the baby group. It was my 3rd mission. It was the group's 5th mission, and they stuck us at the tail end so we wouldn't screw up the works. And we went to the target. We had 29 airplanes on the field. 29 airplanes took off, and 29 airplanes went over the target. The baby boat group did a real fine job, and I'm proud of all of the people and the ground crews and the airmen that participated in that effort. But there were just 3 groups there, and there were 14 groups of B-24s in the 2nd Division, and they did the super job that I'm talking about earlier. Now, one thing we did do, we had they needed some extra crews in the other groups. And so I asked for volunteers, and I thought I'd have trouble getting volunteers. I got all the volunteer crews I needed to go on that mission. A strange group, strange leader, strange airplanes, and they deserve an awful lot of credit for participating in that way. For our own story, we did go up the wrong valley, or General Wood went down the wrong valley, and I knew it was the wrong valley, and I darn near went down the 2nd valley. If I had, we'd have come head on to each other, and it would have been a disaster. I followed him up the 2nd valley, and we all saw the target then in the 3rd valley. By the time we got George Hammond here, he picked the bombardiers and so forth, and we had John Fino in the lead airplane. And he had delayed action bombs, but his bombs were so accurate that the first batch of 12 airplanes had to fire on the target on fire by the time we went through, which speaks real high of the quality of the bombardiers that we had perform for us on that mission. It wasn't just flying the airplanes that did it and flying them at 100 or 200 feet. It was the bombardiers and the navigators we had that did the whole thing. And let's not forget what I said to start with. We had 29 airplanes on the field, and 29 airplanes went over the target, and that speaks very highly of our ground crews that got those airplanes ready and put them in such good condition.
Roy Newton was a gunner in the 98th Bomb Group. He flew on a ship called Hadley's Harem And Roy, if you could get up and tell us a little bit about your day at Ploesti that day.
I'm a little frightened. It's taken 44 years for me to sit in front of this many people at this distance, and it reminds me of that frightening experience of going through Ploesti. Obviously, I'm not a very good speaker, but what I remember that's most significant is that before we boarded the plane at Benghazi that morning, our pilot, Gil Hadley, was pacing back and forth in front of the plane, and we came in by truck, and he had been there for some time and was obviously very upset about something. And the first time that Hullwagger, the other waist gunner, and myself hit the ground, Hadley grabbed us by the arm and pulled us aside and said, "I didn't think that these dumb fools were going to pull this thing off." He said, for 2 days I've tried to tell them not to put incendiaries on my plane. And he said, there are 4 cases, and you guys are going to have to get rid of these things before we get to Ploesti. He says, as much as a crazy pilot as I am and as daring as I am, I'm just not about ready to carry those things into a flaming target. So he said, when we get into some cloud formation, you very carefully, one at a time, unload these 4 boxes. The boxes were about 30 to 36 inches long and maybe 18, 20 inches high. I have no idea how many incendiaries there were in there, but we pitched them out the waist windows in the cloud cover. And the reason that this was so significant is coming into Ploesti, we were probably maybe 5 or 10 miles out, and we're at somewhere around 50 feet. We had just gone through some treetops and had pulled up. We were flying formation off of Killer Kane on his left side, and we simultaneously had 3 hits. The first one blew the nose of the ship off, killing our bombardier Storms. Another hit shot out number 2 engine, and they finally got that feathered. And then there was a heavy concussion hit up underneath the rear of the bomb bay area where the waist gun positions were, and it buckled the ship. And this was exactly where those 4 boxes of incendiaries were. And the floor was buckled, and both Hullwagger and I were thrown to the floor. So, it was just an absolute miracle that Hadley had the foresight to have us unload those incendiaries. I got back on my feet, and I looked out, stuck my head out the waist window and looked under the wing, and I just couldn't believe that whole dark sky ahead of us. It was absolutely black, and I sort of wished I hadn't looked. But the plane was virtually unflyable. It was all over the sky. We had to jettison the bombs in order to get rid of some weight and keep the thing flyable. Kane had drifted back behind us for some reason. I don't know why. He had an engine shot out about the same time. He finally pulled back into position, and we snuggled up next to him and climbed up over the chimney smokestacks. And at that point, we were thrown back down into the deck of the ship again, and got over the other side and went back down on the deck. And then we headed, we stayed with Kane, who was badly damaged. I looked at his plane, and I thought for sure everybody aboard was dead. There were so many holes in his airplane. 2 other ships that had absolutely no damage collected together, came over to ride shotgun for us to head for Cyprus. And it wasn't until the '93 reunion that I found out that there was actually a 5th plane, Sandman, with Bob Sternfels, who was the third shotgunner helping us to get away. And as you'll see in the film, we didn't quite make Cyprus.
His name is Cornel Iliescu, and he's going to give you his version of what he remembers that day from the ground.
Good evening. My name is Cornel Iliescu. I was born in Bucharest, Romania in 1938, and in the time of the war, I was with my father, we were refugee in a small village called Snagov. It was a beautiful place for rich people that lived there, because my father was working for that American company, but was not rich. And at the time of the war, we have to spend our time there since early 41 until late 45. Everybody probably is going to say what this guy is doing here, but this is something that I dream of my life. To me, the pilots that once we've been spending some time together in the woods. One day, and I don't remember exactly the time, it was probably after a huge bombing that happened to be in the capital that destroyed part of the capital. And my dad wants to go and see if our home was being bombed. So we went down there, he took the car, he went down there like 40 miles away from home, and we look around, our home was perfect. There was a lot of buildings completely destroyed, and while we've been looking around, the siren starts, so we know that another bomb raid is gonna come. We have with us a little doggy Pekingese, and the dog gets scared and went out of the bed, so we just run out of the door and hit the road. And almost went out of the town. My dad realized that the dog is not with us, so we just have to turn around and pick up the dog. So we pick up the dog. By the time we did all this back and forth, the planes was close to the capital. So we met the planes approximately about 14 to 18 miles away from refineries. That was the way going home. And just driving and just trying to stay away from all those guns, and probably I believe there was some bombing drops down the road. My dad saw this humongous bird that was just barely landing almost on the same side with us on the road. So he just stopped the car, pulled him under the tree. He waited until to see what the bomber does, and he told me that he just sweep around near to a forest, and it was a cornfield, but there was no more corn there. And after all the dust stopped, he just rushed with the car and close to the plane. He pulled on the side, and I remember, like now, he put me on top of the wing, in the right wing, and he was trying to pull a couple of pilots out of there. And at the end, he did pull 3 guys and end up with them in the woods. And he said, well, you stay there, and I come right back and go get some more. Well, he never made it back, because looked like the Romanians get to the plane and rescue the rest of the pilots and the wounded. Probably, I heard there were some deaths too. And I stuck with those 3 guys in the woods, and looked like I have a lot of fun. And while I was there, they were trying to get away from the police and from the army, I think. We just didn't know what to do. And I remember that one of the guys that gave me Hershey chocolate to feel good, so not be scared. And believe it or not, I kept that chocolate wrap for the rest of my life, and I still, it's in one of the books home in Romania. And it's something that I will never forget. But that was not it. That's one of the guys says, well, you know what? You got to have something to play. So I had nothing to play, so he gave me a pair of pliers. So I have to play with a pair of pliers, so I have something to do. And I don't know, Ron, you do have the plier with you? Where are you, Ron? Yeah, please, why don't you bring the plier here? I didn't put it in my pocket. You have the plier. So anyway, After, no, it's not with me. It must be. After a while, of course, that they were being captured by the Romanians, and I heard they will be very well treated. Like everybody knows, the king at that time and the princess of Romania didn't let the pilots to be captured by the Germans, and they were stationed somewhere in Bucharest for a while. Then was transferred with the bus to a location somewhere in the Carpathian Mountains over a place called Sinaia. That's another beautiful resort. That was one of the wings of the King Carol Castle. They were treated very well, they ate very well, and I was very happy to hear that when I would grow up. Now what happened is that all those years, something happened with me, I don't know what, but those guys give me a lot of strength and give me something to believe into it, and I dream all my life that I gotta meet those guys, and went through all those years. I made it over here in this country, great country, and I keep on searching in 70s, 80s, and when I heard they're gonna come over here tonight for a few minutes, I couldn't even breathe. I was so happy, I didn't know what to do. I said, I don't believe this happened to me. I said, I'm gonna meet those guys, I don't believe it. And here I am. I'm so happy that those guys, that I see them up there, and like you guys heard that everybody was waving to us, nobody was an enemy. We thought they're gonna stay there, they're gonna leave, they're gonna stay there, they're gonna save us from our neighbors, and well, too bad they left. So there was no problem. I didn't quit saying that I have to become an American. And I just escaped, I ran away, I ran through the water, through the hell. I made it here, and now I'm with my friends. And I'm very happy to be here tonight, and like I said, I called my brother in Texas and tell him, please send my plier that was received by me, those heroes. And I do have the plier with me. Unfortunately,
Cornell, are you sure you don't have those pliers in your pocket? You might want to check one more time.
No. No, cannot be a miracle. No, it is a miracle that I'm in tonight, but it's not a miracle. He's got the pliers somewhere there, and I wish that I can show this plier that was given to me by one of the crew members, probably just to shut up, not to make any more noises, so they've been picked up by the military police. But I dreamed to have this plier, and I asked my brother that he wants to give me the plier, so I can put it in my office and in my shop, and with the little words, and to be proud of my dad that saved the life of those pilots. And he told me a lot of story about the Americans, and one thing happened to me, and ever since I met those Americans, since the first grade, the only thing I did, I draw American flag everywhere, on the street, on the cars, everywhere. And even today, I have my office, and my car has an American flag, my everything. So this is something that probably those guys give it to me, and I'm very proud of them. Thank you very much.
He might not find his pliers, but if when you go out tomorrow morning, you'll see a Jeep parked out front, World War II Jeep, and that's his Jeep. What's that got to do with Ploesti? I don't know, but it's parked out there.
Well, this is another souvenir from this country. I love Jeeps. And the moment I grew up, the first thing I did in Romania, I found a World War II Jeep, and I drove it until I quit. I just said, hell with you guys, I'm out of here. So I made it here, and it's the first thing I said, the number one, I'm going to get a Jeep. I have a new one, and I said, well, I don't like it. I like the real one, the grandfather. So I bought it, that thing, and I worked hard for 2 years. I restored it, like you guys saw it. And now we do reenactments, and we play real American wars, and we just fight the Germans, and we're very happy with it. Thank you very much.
What I'd like to do here to take the panel part of this program out to its conclusion is ask each one of our guests to make a very brief, and I stress the word brief, gentlemen, statement about your feelings about the mission, possibly something that you felt when you got back to the base, if in fact you got back to the base that day. And I know Dick has a letter that he wrote home the day after the mission to his wife he'd like to read to you here.
The day after the mission, I wrote a letter to my wife, Ardith. She kept that letter, and I'd like to share some of it with you now. I'm going to bed pretty quick now, and I'm still tired from yesterday. I had a pretty long day. Got up at 4:30, took off at 7:30, flew 13.5 hours, and then spent half the night down at the hospital giving blood for transfusion to an injured fellow. All in all, it was a pretty long and rough day. No doubt you've read about or heard about it by now. It sure was something to remember, and I guess about the biggest thing I'll ever do in this way. It certainly was a lot different than the way we usually work. Old Earthquake looks like a sieve again, but everybody else is okay.
Bill, do you have any particular feelings on your return to Benghazi that evening, or?
Well, we were exhausted. It was really nice to land. And of course, everybody was excited, came up the airplane in their Jeeps and everything. Wondering what happened to a lot of the other people. Only 2 of us got back from my particular formation, but there were a lot of other people that went to Turkey or wherever. So it wasn't all that bad. It looked awfully bad. But that was my 28th mission, and I flew 11 more. So that was probably, you know, thank God I flew that mission. You guys would never be here and talking. I wouldn't have a chance to talk to you. But there were all those other missions, which were pretty darn exciting also. Although I admit Ploesti was very, very special. Thank you.
Charlie, you're next.
I can't tell you about getting back to Benghazi because I didn't go back to Benghazi. I went to Turkey, and that evening the Turkish Air Force, very proud to have us land there. They acquired 7 B-24s for their Air Force. By the rules of the day, the aircraft belonged to them, and we belonged to them as internees until we got out. My memory about getting down on the ground in this party was that in Africa, the big problem with most of us was called dysentery. And I was bothered with the problem all the way to the target. And suddenly I was no longer bothered. But in Turkey, and after this party, they have a drink called raki, and they have beer called bira, and the whole problem returned. And I'll always remember that.
Have you ever looked forward to a mission? I had mixed emotion about this one. I kind of looked forward to it because I knew it was my last mission either way, and I came home.
You're next, Pete.
I don't know. I thought I was finished. I thought I made my speech. But you're talking about when we returned from our mission. I was a little bit angry at my engineer, Bob Woofter, because the radio man, sometimes I wonder why they even had us on the ships during these missions, because all our orders were maintain silence. So we had nothing to do, really. They did give us a camera, and they said, well, you use this camera as half the size of a bread box. And I had that camera to use, but I wanted to get at the upper turret, but this Bob Woofter, our engineer, he kept our ship in such good shape, there was never any problem with the upper turret or with the ship itself. So I could never get an opportunity to get the upper turret because I wanted to get some of those guns. But he kept the ship in such good shape that I was angry at him most of the time because he was a good engineer and he did good. But I give him heck. It's, when I got back, I said, you know, at the next mission we get on, Bob, maybe you'll find some problem and give me a chance to use that upper turret. Thank you.
The mission was a very memorable experience, and I'm glad I don't have to do it again.
A new meaning to the word brief. Ray, you're up next.
Well, it was after we got home, I began to realize just how lucky we really were on that trip, and I mean lucky. It seemed very bad. It seemed like only about half of our guys got back to Benghazi that night. And I remember a few days later being sent to the island of Malta to help pick up some crews. Only the war-weary airplane we were given to fly to Malta collapsed its nose gear, so we were stuck there too. So I'd say, again, we were very lucky. And I don't think I'd want to do that trip again, not that kind. They were rough. Thank you.
Well, there's a couple of things about the mission that I would just like to mention. One is that my oldest daughter was born the next day after that, so my wife was busy while I was going on that mission. Then the other thing is that it was a long mission, and when we landed, I was in Rodenberg's airplane. When we landed, we did not have enough fuel left to taxi back to our dispersal area.
General Brooks, if you would. I'd like to have General Brooks speak about something that took place long after the mission had since been finished. As Dick told you early in the program, there were 5 Medal of Honors given out on this mission. It's the only military action in military history that's ever happened. But one of those posthumous awards was given far beyond the conclusion of the mission. And General, if you could tell that story, please.
The recipient was Lieutenant Hughes. It took us a long time to get the Medal of Honor for him. He was just a lieutenant. They don't give Medals of Honor to lieutenants very often. And I told the story over and over again and wrote it several times, so much so it almost seems like he was on my wing. I became so much a part of the story. He got hit by 20 mil before he got into the target. He was told to bail out one more, to pull off, not bail out, but to pull off one more airplane wouldn't make any difference. He just shook his head. Apparently the radio was out too. Shook his head, he wasn't going to do it. Went through the target with us and came out on fire and tried to make it into the riverbed, a dry riverbed. Didn't make it, and all but one in the crew was lost. And he did a super job, but it's just symbolic of the spirit of all of these guys on the mission. You asked how I felt too. My feelings was twofold, I guess. Pride is one of them. Proud of the outfit, the baby outfit, that destroyed 90% of their target. It was out of commission for 9 months after we hit it. And we didn't know it at that time, but I was proud because I knew we'd done a good job. I was proud of the 6 crews that volunteered and went with other organizations because they all got home. Badly shot up, but they got home. And I was thankful for 2 guys that showed their courage in flying my way on the way back. We had to leave the rest of the formation. They were going on a dog leg to the Adriatic and down to Benghazi. And we analyzed our gas in our airplane, Ward's airplane, and we couldn't make it back if we went that route. So we told the crew, the rest of the formation, to go and follow General Wood, then a colonel, and follow the regular flight back. And we headed across Greece, which was supposed to be a hotbed for German fighters. As we got out there a little ways, 6 Messerschmitts queued up off our left wing, and we thought we were really going to catch it now. And on my left wing, a B-24 pulled up on that wing, and a B-24 pulled up on my right wing. And I think that discouraged the 109s enough so that they did not make a very decent attack against us, and we came on back home. I think those guys were real heroes too. It's a case where disobedience can be forgiven, I guess, because I'm sort of thankful that they disobeyed the orders and stayed with us all the way back to Benghazi. Dale Sisson and Tollison were on our wing, and I'm real proud of those guys too, and thankful. We look at the record, and all the guys did a super job, and I think, but this was just one mission. I got one more minute. That target was so important that the B-24s from Italy had to hit it 25 more times, all of them at high altitude. That was the end of the low altitude effort. They went at high altitude to keep Ploesti under control because it was the most important target in Europe. The only target more defended than Ploesti was Berlin. And these guys that followed behind us carried on the war against Ploesti, and I think we owe them a lot of thanks too for the good job they did against the #1 bad target of the Germans. That's all. Thank you.
We left the ship 700 feet offshore of Turkey, and 7 of us got out, and I had a lot of pain for quite a few days until we finally got some medical help. Then after I got out of the service and finally got my leg repaired, I forgot about Ploesti. I didn't have ill feelings. I had good feelings that maybe something good had been done, but I forgot about it mainly because every time I would run into somebody and they'd say, "What did you do during the war?" I'd start to tell them, and they'd end up telling me a more horror story than what we went through. So I just forgot about it and went on with my life.
Thank you, Pete.
Me and I'm going to ask him to step up to the microphone. Pliers.
Well, I did find the pliers, and I was scared. Wow. I can afford to lose this, and that's my life. Says over here, it says Jamestown, New York, United States Air Force, June of 1940. So I heard that every single technician in the B-24 carry one of those. Some gentleman told me, yeah, so I'm so more powerful now that one of those days, probably I'm not gonna quit. So my love affair with those B-24 pilots is not in. I'm gonna continue looking long as I live until I found those guys. And I'm gonna give them a hug and a kiss, and probably I'm gonna be the happiest man in the world. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's just something that but anyway, I was trying to mention something. Those heroes I read lately in the books, they dropped 57.8 million tons of bombs until they destroyed the target of Germany. And Romanians still friends, and we love them. Thank you very much.
That winds up our symposium, folks, and I want to thank all of our participants here. I think they've done an excellent job. Thank you for listening to us, and thank you, Pete. I think you've done a wonderful job as our moderator.